Guys, Spider-Man No Way Home is out today, and I have been desperately trying to keep all spoilers and all secrets to myself for like 2 days now, and it has been harder than any other movie I've seen all year to do that for. But now I'm able to talk about it. So as a final warning to anyone who ignored the thumbnail, who ignored the title, this is going to be a spoiler review of Spider-Man No Way Home and all the juicy details that came out of this movie. Go to the movie, then come back and watch this video because you're not going to want this to be spoiled. Spider-Man No Way Home is so much more and so much different than I ever could have anticipated it to be. I think the actual premise of the story, and not just, oh, he asked Doctor Strange to forget who Peter Parker is, but the reason being the fact that it's affecting him and Ned and MJ's chances of getting into college and their very like normal futures. I love that. I think it is absolutely brilliant. I talked about it in no context in my non-spoiler review, but Jon Watts and the writing team behind this Spider-Man, this MCU Spider-Man, really understand how to write like things that feel major in a teenager's life, like having a girlfriend, going to college, and all of those massive events that teenagers stress about. I think they perfectly capture it here. And I also really love the fact that it removes a lot of what everyone was saying in the trailers. Strange is off his rocker, Strange shouldn't agree to do this, and even the little clip they have of Wong saying don't do the spell and Strange seeming even more reckless. That, to you, ladies and gentlemen, is a lesson in montage and editing and the concept of the fact that you can stitch things together and make a completely different assumption than if you edit them a completely different way. So obviously we're used to this in Marvel. We've seen them edit people out, which we'll get to in a little bit, and we've seen them cut clips together that don't even happen in a movie or are not actually next to each other or happen in the same scene, especially with lines of dialogue being changed. I'm so glad they did that for this movie because as much as I don't agree that this is like an endgame level event, it is certainly a huge fanfare, spoiler-filled movie. And if they hadn't done something like that and let us a little bit more into what the plot was going to be or certain details, I really don't think it would have happened as nicely as it did. So my major takeaway for this movie, in case you decide to click off sooner rather than later, this movie is everything a Spider-Man movie should be. I think it captures that high school Peter Parker persona that we talked about. It juggles how he struggles to be both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I think it expertly uses villains, and a lot of villains here, which I kind of was worried wasn't going to go over well because we all know that when Marvel introduces a few too many villains, things can get a little dicey. But here, I honestly think it worked really well because there are some villains who aren't, even in the original films that they are a part of, they're not as villainous, specifically Sandman or even Otto Octavius. Although we love Doc Ock and he can be extremely menacing, when his chip is fixed or at the beginning of Spider-Man 2, we see him as kind of this good mentor type figure, and I think getting to see all of those different elements of the villains really made it feel like, okay, we don't just have one group of totally evil people that he has to completely take down by himself. So I thought that was excellent writing in terms of the villains. I thought the dialogue between them worked really well, specifically Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin / Norman Osborn and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock Otto Octavius. I think their dynamic worked so well, and I think was honestly such great payoff for people who are huge fans of Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. I know Spider-Man 3 kind of gets left out of the conversation sometimes, but I thought Sandman was a great addition, and then I think Electro and Lizard played for kind of the perfect mix of comedic relief while also giving those villains the time to shine in a way I don't know that the Amazing Spider-Man 1 or 2 necessarily gave them. That brings me to the midpoint with all of the villains in Happy's apartment when Peter is trying to help save them. I think that works incredibly well because it shows that Peter has gone about this in a different way than maybe the Avengers would or any other larger than life superhero. They would have just kind of taken out the threat, neutralized it, maybe gone with Doctor Strange's advice. And I think it really speaks to the fact that some of these Avengers are almost too powerful for their own good. Like Strange can just make the entire world forget that he's Peter Parker, causing issues with the multiverse. I'm not saying it's all Strange's fault, but MJ does make some good points about him being the one that needs to clean it up. But having that and then seeing Peter go about it the way that Aunt May suggests and the way that we've seen him handle threats in the past, like even Vulture in the Spider-Man Homecoming and Mysterio in Spider-Man Far From Home, I think those are brilliant. I thought it was excellent, and it served for a perfect like ticking time bomb of all of these villains being together at one time. I think that entire scene just worked extremely well for me. I think it's a beautiful midpoint because it goes from being a Spider-Boy movie, if you will, to a Spider-Man movie of what happens when you try to do the right thing and it fails. Do you continue to do the right thing or do you cave? And that is what the end of this movie explores so beautifully, and I absolutely loved it. How do I even say this? Bringing back the Spider-Men. Bringing them back. These scenes, oh my gosh, not only are they brilliant fanfare and done so well, but it gives so much closure to those two actors, so much closure to their villains, so much comedy that feels ripped from the Reddit threads or Tumblr reblogs of just fans back in the day, like imagining what a situation like this would look like. There were so many parts of their interactions, all three of them, that were beautiful because they were better than I ever could have imagined them to be, yet they were so satisfying. And Marvel, as much as I will say there are parts of this that I feel go on a little too long for the pace of the rest of the movie, you're so enthralled with the fact that they are there that it doesn't matter. And for them, I would rather have the fanfare of them being there for longer than Marvel cutting it short just for the sake of a tighter movie. And I think that's where people get into the argument of the MCU and how great these films can actually be, because they do take a little bit more time to reward the fans for their fan theories and speculations, and they want to give the fans what they want to see, but sometimes that can add a little bit to it. So if I'm being completely honest, I think that part of the movie as a film runs a little bit fatty, if you will. I think it is the best fat. It's like chocolate dessert that you've been dying to eat for 3 days. This is a dinner you've looked forward to, and finally when it arrives there, you're gonna eat every last piece and lick the frosting off the plate. Excuse the metaphors, it's getting way too long, but it is just, it's glorious, I will say, and it's so raw and emotional too, and it happens at this point in the movie after May dies that is just brilliant, because they are able to really relate these Spider-Men on both their need to do good with the grief and the hardship of, yeah, we all started this when we were teenagers or young 20-somethings, and like it just gets harder, man. Like I think that was just such a real conversation, and to me that brings Tom Holland's Spider-Man to a higher level. And honestly, I think it puts to bed and puts to rest a lot of the people who have disliked Tom Holland's Spider-Man before, and I said this to some degree in my spoiler-free review, but anyone that didn't like him, I think, complained about him not feeling mature enough, not losing anything, not having stakes, and boy does this movie smash all of those things away and get rid of them completely, like those complaints. But I think the fact that he gets the badge of approval from Tobey and Andrew makes me believe that how else can you argue with the fact that he now is who he is? Also, jumping around a little bit, now I've got to the midpoint, we're going back to the beginning. The opening scene and sequence just of teenage life, everyone figuring it out, swinging through New York City in the subway, trying to get away from people as the news breaks. It just really starts you out running with this movie. It's kind of like that TikTok where it's like, okay, waiting, when we're gonna go, go. That's how this movie feels, and it is a ride from start to finish. But that opening sequence was so good. It had so much comedy in it, and it felt so chaotic that by the end of the movie, when you have that sense of peace and resolution, it feels so beautiful and so mature that the stakes have been raised for this Spider-Man. But in that opening sequence is my man, Matt Murdock. Charlie Cox is back, baby. Daredevil is back. I'm so freaking excited. We got both Kingpin and Matt Murdock back in this week through 2 Marvel products, and I am just absolutely thrilled. It was such a short scene, but I thought it was perfect because, again, my worry was if we add too many elements to this like puzzle here, things are gonna get lost, and I think that was just the perfect way to include him. Again, give the fans some fanfare, just reward everyone. I mean, like, honestly, if you're just screaming in the theater when he shows up, you probably will just miss all of his lines, but that's okay. Another reason to go see it again. I personally just absolutely love the ending. I think it's heartbreaking, and it's not one I ever saw happening, but I think the way that this movie goes about Peter trying to decide how he's going to be a hero and what ends he will go to save the day and be a hero, seeing him progress and go through different steps of that throughout this film, I think is what makes it the Spider-Man film that exceed anyone's expectations for what a Spider-Man film should be, because it makes me think about how high the stakes are for Peter as an individual, yet how potentially low they could be for the universe. Obviously, the spell is there. They can use it at any point to like fix the cosmic effects of everything, but the fact that it's going to personally impact Peter in such a way that is so devastating, so heartbreaking, is just brutal. But I think just the pieces of the puzzle that make it possible are so good. And again, not the way at all I expected the movie to end, but I thought it was beautiful because, again, it raises the stakes. If no one at all knows that he's Peter Parker, he almost has a fresh slate as Spider-Man. And I assume that this is the perfect place to raise the stakes for 3 more Spider-Man movies, as Amy Pascal and some of the producers of the film have confirmed. It also is great for the establishment of those ground level NYC superheroes that we've been talking about, of him and Daredevil and Echo, where they can fight more basic crime or whatever, and they don't necessarily have to be Avengers. Not everyone in the MCU has to be an Avenger at this point. Ultimately, this movie, the fanfare it includes, the cameos, I think it is so well written, and I don't want that to be lost in the fact that the villains have returned, the Spider-Men have returned, Charlie Cox is back as Matt Murdock and Daredevil. All of that stuff is great, but at the end of the day, I think this is truly everything that a Spider-Man fan could hope for a Spider-Man movie, and I am so excited to go see this in a theater because I will say, as amazing and grateful as I am to have been able to see this movie early, and how cool it was even still to see these things happen on screen with fellow critics, it is not the same as the energy that it could have had in the theater. And honestly, my biggest complaint of the movie is that my first time watching it was not sitting with friends and jumping up in excitement, and the buzz of the theater after some of these things happened, I think would have made all of those reveals so much better. And so I cannot wait at the soonest possible moment to go see this movie again. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of Spider-Man No Way Home. I can't believe it's already come and is here, and I've seen it, and you guys are seeing it, and this is just, what a time to be alive, right? Please be sure to like this review if you did enjoy it, and consider subscribing if you're new here, because I do all kinds of reviews like this for MCU movies, but just other movies and television and entertainment in general, so you won't want to miss that. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever you're getting to watch this, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, guys.